Alright, Devlog for April 2023. I have done kind of like the final things I need to do before I can distribute the game. I have finally tested the entire game in a package build, and I can confirm that I can play the game from beginning to end. I've therefore also recorded and uploaded a new gameplay test on my channel this month, which basically shows a vertical slice of the demo of me playing through it. Further things that I have done for final stuff that I wanted to do is performance improvements, new models, and also fixes to platform movement and elevator movement. So I will first show elevator movements in the... So the problems I was having with platform movement or movement in general is that it's interactions between moving entities was kind of buggy and it didn't work very well. I finally fixed everything about that. So I can now perfectly walk on a moving elevator without me sinking into it or just having weird movement bugs. It also, when I jump, I now perfectly inherit the speed of the elevator. I can show that better with this one. So if I jump, you can perfectly see how I just inherit the speed of the elevator, the / moving platform. So yeah, that is great. Another thing that I fixed with movement is that pushing entities and entities pushing each other now works correctly. In that enemies are now pushed to the sides, but because beforehand, what would happen if you were to run into an enemy instead of this happening, where you basically get pushed to the side slowly because the normals of the character collision are basically pushing against each other sideways. You would just push the enemy straight, which was kind of dumb. That's not how it works. So enemies can now more easily walk around each other. This is especially important when you have a ranged enemy that's like standing still and a melee enemy that's trying to get past the standing enemy. So now the melee enemy can very easily walk around the standing enemy. I've also standardized a lot of pushing and movement logic into a library. So there were a lot of functions that were basically the same in multiple different movement classes, which has now all been unified into one single movement function, which works great. I'm not gonna show it because it would take too long to explain. These devlogs have a tendency to spend 10 minutes on very technical stuff that nobody's interested in. So another thing that I've done is model improvements. I have improved some models that are very obviously needed improvements. So one of the models that I've improved is all of the crates and containers. These are the new models. They are vastly better than the old models. And this time I will actually show a comparison. I usually don't show comparisons because it takes time and I can't be bothered. But this was the old model. And this is the new model of like the same crate. And you can just see how much better the new model is. I have gotten way better. I finally really gotten to understand like designing designing geometry, designing objects for video games. There are just specific things that I've just... Okay. So not only do they look better, they're still, like, in terms of performance, way better. So this thing has 1,300 faces. This thing has 776 faces. So it has 600 polygons less than this thing. And it looks so much better. And that is mostly because I've stopped doing this shit, where I bevel edges. Like, I've stopped beveling edges. Doing stuff like this... Select... Doing stuff like this is just not worth it, because you just can't see it from a distance, and honestly, I don't think it looks very good. Especially this. I'm gonna come back to this later in like the other model things that I want to talk about, but these like small bevels are so not worth it in video games. They just take up polygon counts and it just hurts performance. Again, I will talk about this later. So yeah, it looks so much better. You can see the new crates in the main menu as well. So yeah. The other model improvement that I've made is for the troopers. So I've made a whole new... The troopers were another thing. So the space crates look terrible. Another thing that looked just really bad were the troopers, the soldiers in the game. Those models were just terrible. So I've made a whole new model set. I can actually show it with the outfit because the Soldier clothing is also available as an outfit for the character. I do need to quickly give it to me as an unlock. So this is the new soldier outfit. It looks way better. And not only the soldier outfit has improved, also the armor that comes with it. These are way better than the old ones. Especially the helmet. So I can quickly go into my Blender file. So this is my Blender file for the new soldier. And this is what the old soldier looked like. So if I quickly go to this. So this is the old soldier and this is the new soldier model. Obviously, I still need to make a male version of the model because right now, if I quickly hide the body armor, you can clearly see that this is the female version of the armor of the clothing because I first make the player version. But yeah, I have to edit this for it to be a male version. So this will be just a lot wider because the biggest problem I had, I think I always said it, but these guys look weirdly lanky, and the reason why they look lanky is because they basically use a female skeleton. Like, I made the player first, and then I made the enemies, but the enemies basically share the same skeleton, because I'm not gonna waste my time making a second human skeleton. But that does came at the downside that they are just too skinny. It doesn't look too bad when they're standing still, but when they're in movement, you can just tell just how skinny they are. And when I look at like other games, especially like Half-Life, enemies look way beefier. And beefier enemies are more fun to shoot because it feels like you have a bigger surface area to aim for. So yeah. This is going to be way wider. So even though the body is going to extend quite a lot past the skeleton, I still think it will work just fine. So that's really the primary motivation of why I wanted new models. So yeah. Another showcase that this does is it just shows just how bad my modeling was for video games. Again, so for example, the webbing, which are these like ropes that go around, not ropes, but like, yeah, I mean, it's webbing, whatever. It's called webbing. The webbing that's going around is actually 3D modeled. So this is actually two-sided. This is an absolute waste of polygons. If you compare this to the body armor, I'm gonna take number 3. I'm gonna freeze a bit. Oh yeah, these are broken textures. I will fix that. This is not yet done. I'll talk about that. These are just one-dimensional. Actually, two-dimensional. I mean, technically they're still three-dimensional, but you know what I mean. Like, they only have one side to them. Which is absolutely fine, because at this distance, what is basically the maximum distance you will ever see this as, you can't tell the difference between this and this. It's just an utter waste of polygons. The same goes here with this flashlight. Again, I made a new flashlight model. The bevel like this, like these type of bevels, are just not worth it. Like, they just require... Oh, I think I got... Yeah, this is a really good example. Like, these tiny bevels here, these are not worth it for video games. Like, you can't see this bevel from far away. Like, this is just an entirely wasted polygon. And while modern GPUs can handle really high poly count, those bevels will still count for dynamic shadows. And dynamic shadows are the most expensive thing of a video game. I will talk about shadows later, because they're part of the performance improvements. So yeah, I don't think I have to show this model more. I mean, another problem I had with the model was that, like, the old Shock Brigade, like, lettering is literally hidden by the webbing. So it is what, like, oh god, like, this is also just another thing that was just so bad. Whereas if I go to the body armor level 2, the new one, the Falcon division, you can clearly still read it, because I've basically modeled this after a laser cut molly stuff, which, if you are not into tactical gear, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But basically, I actually have a bunch of tactical gear myself, so I was able to, like, use that as, like... I usually never have stuff that I can use to, like, do hands-on modeling, but I actually have a lot of tactical gear. So I was actually able to use hands-on, like, stuff to help me modeling. This also shows, this model, just how little polygons you can get away with for video game modeling. Like, I have really gotten competent at modeling for video games, because this is what how few polygons there are. Like, this is barely anything. But once it's all textured up, you can't really see that this is super low poly. I mean, it's not low poly, but you know what I mean. Like this entire armor is 662 polygons, which is just nothing. Like a lot of that is actually in like the click connectors, I think. This doesn't have click connectors, but yeah. Another thing I started doing with these models is standardizing stuff like pouches. So I basically just have a lot of resources where I just have a large collection of like tactical gear that I can just stick onto the model. So here you can see like a bunch of pouches, molly. This is like, this is for ammo. So I think this one uses its proprietary pouch, but if I go to armor level 3, yeah, here you can see those magazines. They're in like these magazine pouches. So yeah. And these things, the things about this stuff is that they all use the same texture set. Like I didn't make unique texture sets for each freaking thing. That was another problem that was having. Like I just had way too many textures. Like way too many texture materials. Like these all use the same materials. They're basically just reused. Like I'm just reusing materials and I'm just selecting which material each face should use. And that is just way better because it is really frustrating when you have a outfit or something that has like a dozen materials. Like if I go to some of the old stuff, this is the old level 3 armor. And if I go to plate carriers, this is the new level 3 armor. Yeah, it doesn't have legs. I'll talk about it later. This has a total of 1, 2, 3, 7, 6. It has 6 texture sets, six materials, because a lot of these pouches and stuff, they are just sharing the same material, so I don't need like a ton of different materials. Whereas armor 3 had a ton. This has 11 plus 0, it's 12 freaking, has double the amount of materials, which is just awful to put, because this is right here. This is the logic that basically handles clothing the player. This is what gives the player its their outfit. So, which means that if I go to my armor level 3, this is what basically 6 material slots look like. Imagine if this was double. Like this is such a pain in the ass to keep track of. Like the moment you go above like 8 materials, it just becomes a mess. Like I remember the first time I had to do this with the original 12 materials, and I constantly had to like switch back and forth between this and this to make sure I had this in the right order. It was just completely fucking awful. So yeah, major improvement. This is something I will never do, because like stuff like this, like the thigh satchels, like these thigh satchels use their own proprietary texture, which again I should not do. Like these things should not have their own proprietary texture. I should just use a reusable texture, which I have in the form of the molly pouches. This molly pouches, this is just a texture that I can reuse for different pouches. One material for all of the pouches, no separate pouches. Same with the webbing. This webbing here has its own proprietary webbing. So I have MI body armor level 3 straps. This is its own proprietary material, whereas this plate armor just uses MI tactical webbing. This is just a webbing texture that can be reused for all webbing. I've said enough. Like I have way improved the way that I make stuff. Like basically things that I do for programming, like dividing and conquering, like just dividing stuff up in subcomponents and then remixing and matching those subcomponents, and then reusing materials instead of just constantly making new materials and just adding more materials up to the pile to keep track of. That's really stuff that I'm also just improving. Like the logic I use of reusability that I use for coding, I now also use for modeling. Like reuse models properly, remix them properly, so you don't have to do a lot of additional work. So yeah. Another thing I want to talk about is the lack of, the character can kind of look weird if I customize outfit. So it can look a bit weird with the other outfits. So level 1 armor looks fine, But once you get to level 2 armor, the legs, it's kind of weird that there is no leg armor. But the problem with leg armor is that I've always had kind of like trouble accounting for like the legs. Like these fatigues have way thicker legs because of the baggy pants. So it's really difficult to account for that to make leg armor. So I could make leg armor that perfectly fits over this, but then it would horrendously clip through these pants. If I were to make armor that perfectly fits over these pants, then it would be way too wide for these yeah, I mean, but for this bodysuit. So I'll just keep only the upper level, even though it looks a bit silly on like this. But hey, you can always put on the Akova fatigues if you have it unlocked, and it looks great here. I'll also talk probably very quickly about probably the funnest stuff I've done, made, and then I'll shut up about this. Blender, entity, human, Akova trooper. It's base equipment. So let's open this. Let's not open too much, otherwise the GPU might start struggling. So yeah. This right here is the helmet. I had a lot of fun modeling this. This is probably one of my best made models, the helmet. It's obviously designed after like a fast helmet with those like 4-eye binoculars, which are ludicrously expensive. I actually discovered what these things cost in real life. Oh dear god. Insane. Absolutely insane. So yeah. This is a really cool modular piece. And they all share the same texture. Like all of these things just basically share the same texture. So if I go to the helmet, you can basically see that they all just use MI Akova helmet. So a lot of the separate components of the helmet just use this texture. They basically have just one big master texture, which again really helps with me keeping track of textures, because having to take care of like 5-6 different materials is just annoying as hell. So yeah, that's kind of like all the stuff I wanted to say about modeling. Actually, there's one more thing I want to talk about modeling, which is for I'm gonna go to map EM1. So I have improved kind of like the two worst things. The two worst types of models I've basically improved. So the crate models, those were terrible. I have improved, and it just instantly looks so much better. The lighting, I think the lighting needs to be rebuilt. Yeah, I have not yet rebuilt lighting for this map with the new crates, so that's why the crates look so weird. But just it looks so much better with the new crates. Like just these models are just so much higher quality, and it just immediately improves the graphics. Just immediately. So yeah, another thing that I've improved is the Akova troopers. The Akova troopers they look terrible, and I think it's gonna massively improve the look of the game. Now, there is one last thing that I'm unhappy with the game, and that is the tile set. This tile set, which I basically made like 2 years ago, I'm actually gonna open it up in the meshes file. Meshes, geometry, tile set, industrial. So yeah, it's just stuff like this. This stuff just doesn't look good. It doesn't really fit the sci-fi aesthetic that I'm trying to go for. This stuff is just over 2 years old, and it just doesn't look good. It just makes the entire level look like a boring concrete box. So I'm definitely not gonna fix this before the demo. But one of the things that is on the list to do for after I've released the demo is fix this tile set. This tile set needs to look futuristic AF. It's just a boring concrete box right now every level. Not every level, the first 2 levels, which take place on the same facility. So yeah. And I think if I improve this tile set, I think the graphics are gonna I think the look of the game is just gonna be big improvement. So let's talk about performance. Last month I talked about bad performance in the game. So the bad performance in the game was caused by, I actually talked about it previously, shadows. The reason why the game was so fucking... I need to stop swearing because YouTube hates that. But the reason why the game was so buggy was because every light had shadows enabled. And that really made the performance crap out during big fights. I have now added a disable dynamic lights toggle, which basically disables shadows for all dynamic objects. Basically disables casting shadows. It doesn't disable cast shadows because then it would also disable baked shadows. It just disables dynamic shadows. Fixing this, and basically pretty much all lights now have this tick enabled. Only for specific lights that I know that will cast dramatic shadows on a wall will have dynamic lights enabled. Doing this for every level has basically fixed the performance. I can run the package project at 134 frames per second on my system from beginning to end on high settings. Perfect. Performance is pretty much great. Especially with the fact that a lot of like the models that I've now remade have lower poly counts. That's just gonna further improve performance because poly counts and shadows work hand in hand, because the more polygons you have, the more expensive your shadows will be. And I think that wraps it up. I don't think I really have... Oh yeah, what's next? So now that the game is basically done, is I now need to start working towards distribution. So I need to start looking into what it takes to distribute the game. The game will also change in name. Like the game has been called Project Speedkills for 2.5 years now. It's not gonna be released as Project Speedkills. There are way too many indie titles that are called Project something something something. But the name will not be revealed until I basically release the game on Steam, the demo on Steam. And I will also put together a trailer for the demo. So those are basically the things that I will be working on. I will be working on getting the game on Steam. That's something that's finally a process that's gonna start happening. And I will be making a trailer, and once both of those things are done, release the demo and the trailer at the same time, reveal the new name of the game, which I already know the name of the game. I'm gonna double check to make sure that there isn't like an intellectual property that shares the same name. I don't think so. But that's pretty much it. So yeah, goodbye.